Welcome to Azure Web App Secrets Exposed. You will have to forgive me if I say website secrets, because since I created this presentation, the name of this feature of Azure has changed 3 times. It went from Windows Azure Web Sites to Microsoft Azure Web Sites to Microsoft Azure Web Apps. So the only thing that we're sure about is Azure and Web, which is good enough for me. So my name is Nik Molnar. I am a web developer from New York City. I work for Microsoft, which means technically I have to remove this thing now, which is sad, but that's okay. In Creamer's heart, I'm still an MVP. That's scary, actually. It's a little stalkery. Was anybody in my session yesterday? OK, cool. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate that. I just want to kind of quickly calibrate the room. How many people in the room would consider themselves first and foremost to be a developer? Let me see a show of hands. OK, a good number of you. We will call you team developer. How many people? I have very original names. How many people would consider themselves to be in the operations game? First and foremost, raise your hand. OK, this guy, maybe this. OK, we will go with team neckbeard for operations. That's good. And you, sir, I'm not really sure what you're doing. Are you DevOps? Are you this thing called DevOps? You have a login. All right. I'm guessing all the ops guys are actually in the big data talk right now. So that's fine. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I am a web developer. I've been a web developer for 18 years. I'm actually from Florida. I went to school at UCF, and I grew up south of Miami in Homestead. Most of you guys know about Homestead because there's that Kansas song, Dust in the Wind, that song about Homestead. No, you guys need to go back to 1993 when that joke was hilarious. But I've always kind of considered myself a software developer, right? Like, there's always hardware involved. There is some server somewhere that my website runs on, but I let Neckbeard go into the closet in the corner of the room, and he handles it for me. He's a very nice guy. What is your name? James. James. We're going to go with James from now on. The organizer of the conference just walked in, and I probably shouldn't berate the attendees. Hi, Paul. But seriously, I would let somebody else handle that. I didn't like getting my hands cut up. I have very soft hands, and there's jagged edges on the servers, and they're scary because they cost thousands of dollars, and I don't want to mess them up. I like software. I can just delete it and restart it, and it doesn't really hurt anybody. However, with the advent of Azure, I'm slowly getting dragged more and more away from team programmer and getting closer to the middle to be the magic unicorn DevOps guy who can do both things. And so I kind of want to share some of that with you. And I think that Azure Web Apps makes me feel a little bit more comfortable saying I'm a DevOps. More comfortable than so-so guy over here. Now, so Azure Web Apps is Microsoft's platform as a service, and it's a part of Azure. And so Azure is this huge monolithic thing. I have buddies who are Azure MVPs or run websites dedicated to just Azure, and I'll call them up and ask them a question about Azure websites. They're like, I have no clue. I'm like, but you're an Azure MVP. But the problem with Azure is it's so big now that nobody knows everything about everything. So in this talk, we're just going to focus on Azure websites. So I chose a proper title for the talk, and we're going to just look into those nooks and crannies. Now, has anybody in the room deployed an Azure website web app before? OK, about half of you. The other half haven't. So let's really quickly go through and deploy an Azure website. When you're working with Azure, everything starts with a special site called the portal. Right? This is kind of where you would go to manage and configure and build everything you're going to do. That website is found at portal.azure.com. This is what it looks like. This is actually, you'll notice, the preview portal. This portal is in beta. And so I can come over here and I can click on my web app. So let's say I want to open up a web app that I have called Herd Dog. It's a little side project that I'm working on. I can see some information about it. I can click on settings, and it opens up another panel. They kind of keep on moving away towards the right. They call these blades. And if I wanted to go and look at the application settings, I can click on that, and it opens up. The Portal is still in beta, and because of that, I find that it has some performance problems. And so I wanted to show it to you because this is the future. This is what you're going to be doing in the future. But for now and for today, I'm going to switch back to the old portal, the one that's currently in production, which is at manage.windowsazure.com. All right? Now, I can come down here and click on web apps, and you'll see all the web apps that I have running in this account. I have multiple accounts. So like the getglimpse.com website, which is my open source project, that runs as an Azure website. It's just somewhere else, so another account, so you can't see it right now. To create a new website, I'm going to say new, compute, web app. I'm going to do a custom creation, and we're going to give this a URL. So let's call it code on the beach demo, and then it'll be .azurewebsites.net. And then this is fine. We're going to put a database to it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new SQL database, and I give a connection string to that database, which I will call data context. I'm choosing that name because we're going to deploy code that already has a connection string called data context in it. That's the only reason why I'm choosing that. And like I said, we're going to deploy code. So I will publish from source control, next. And we're going to give this database a name. Microsoft chooses a great name for us. So let's go ahead and just make it a little bit better. And I'm going to choose a server. Let's go with this server here. And I'll type in my password. OK. Next. Now, Azure wants to know where is the code for this website. And so for that, I have a bunch of different providers. I actually have the code up on GitHub. So I'm going to click on that, hit next. Now watch the screen when I hit next. You'll notice a pop-up window appeared and then disappeared. That pop-up window was opening up github.com. I'm already logged into it, so you guys don't have to watch me log into something else. But if I wasn't, I would have to type in my username and password. I would log into GitHub. And once I'm logged in, you can see here's a list of all the different repositories that I'm a member of. So all the Glimpse one, the Herd Dog one that I already mentioned, some of my personal favorites like this one, which is called Courtesy Flush. That's an open source project that I have that flushes HTTP responses early. But what we're going to do is we're going to deploy the code base from yesterday's talk, for those of you who were in the room yesterday. And that lives in a repository called Talk Full Stack Web Perf. I keep all of my talks in GitHub, including this one. So if you want the slides or any of the demos I showed today, there's a link at the end to get that. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And we are creating a web app. So this will take just a couple of seconds. You'll notice right here it says creating. And so what this is doing in the background is it's spinning up a VM somewhere, IIS is installed on it, and it's configuring everything that I need to, opening up firewall ports or whatever, so I can access the site. Usually, oh, there we go. So I can click on it. Now if I click on it and I go straight to deployments, you'll see that I'm actually in the middle of a deployment right now. You see that it says deploying, fetching changes. Now that the website is built and IIS is there, Azure is reaching out to GitHub, cloning my repo, pulling down all the source from my repo, and all the files are copying from GitHub over to Azure, where it will be built and served. While it does that, because that might take a second, I'm going to show you guys how I can configure my website by clicking on this Configure tab. There's a bunch of different options. I'm fine with all of the defaults for the most part. I do want to go ahead and turn on application logging. I can turn on logging so the files, the log files, will get stored in all these different places, like in table storage or blob storage, which are special storage mechanisms with Azure. I'll just do like standard file system logging, like what you guys might do if you're running your own infrastructure in the closet down the hall. The other thing I'll point out is that there's all these app settings that we can set here, and these work just like what you would expect from your web config file, right? Key value pairs. Let's go ahead and save those configuration changes and see if our deployment is done. Nope, we're still deploying, but it's done downloading all the sources, so we're running the deployment command. So usually this happens fairly quickly. This is actually the slowest part because I'm downloading all the code for the first time, and it's a fairly large image-heavy site for those of you who saw it yesterday. And boom, our deployment is complete. I can click on Browse, and we will go to codeonthebeachdemo.azurewebsites.net. You'll see that it's taking a little while to spin up. It's jitting my .NET code. I'm using Entity Framework migrations, so that database that we created is now getting its schema populated, and I have a bunch of sample data that's getting injected into it. So all of that is happening, and when it's done, boom, we get to see this website. So that sample data that got injected was the list of 160 mascots that root for minor league baseball teams around the nation. I'm a big baseball fan, but I know you're not. So I figured this website about clowns was a compromise. You can click on any single one of the leagues. Like we can see the Florida State League, and you'll see here's all the mascots that root, like Stoney and for the Charlotte Stone Crabs, and Manny the Manatee for the Brevard County Manatees. I have a couple of favorite mascots that I like. If you were in the room yesterday, you know that my favorite mascot of all is this guy. His name is Jalapeno. He's a half jalapeno, half baseball bat. I like baseball and I like food, so they come together in one glorious costume. And then there's this guy. His name is Roscoe the P. Ray Rooster. He's not even at a baseball field. This is how hard the baseball establishment is trying to woo audience members. Like, we'll just use gratuitous violence. Why not? Maybe that'll work. So anyway, so this is a pretty standard website, and all I wanted to do was prove to you that we could deploy something and show you the process. So there, for the people who hadn't deployed something before, now you can say you have. Now, that was all Azure Web Apps that I just showed you. If you're in the room, it could be a little confusing because Microsoft has another thing called Azure Web Roles. They are not the same thing. I kind of like to think of web roles being the older, more mature, slower brother of websites. He's more experienced, so he can do more things. Like, for example, he can open up any TCP or UDP port possible. He can install scripts and things on the machine that he runs in. The web apps can't do that. But the power that you get from web roles, what you lose is some flexibility, and it comes closer to the neckbeards. Right? It's a little bit more operational and a little farther away from the developers. What you get when you come down to web apps is this deployment model that I just showed you, where things are tied directly into Git or Subversion or whatever your source control of choice is, and that makes it very comfortable for developers. It also deploys much faster. I mean, it probably took about 5 minutes for us to get up and running from a cold start with the database, with cloning my repo, with setting up all of the data. A web role would have taken at least 15 minutes to do that. So I recommend if you're building a greenfield app, a brand new app, start with web apps and only graduate to web roles if you have to. If you have an app that's legacy and you're trying to move it online, it might be easier to start with web roles, especially if you're doing some custom stuff, and then try to move it into a web app if that's what you like. So what are Azure Web Apps? Well, the good news is, for the one guy who said he was comfortable with operations, or for the operations guys or gals that you work with, is it's really just technology that you're already familiar with. It's running on Windows in some computer in Azure with a copy of .NET and IIS 8. And there's also this other little thing that runs there called ARR, which stands for Application Request Routing, which we'll talk about later. The main thing that makes Azure Web Apps different than the infrastructure you might be running at your organization is this special layer called Kudu, which is an open source project from Microsoft, which is why I've represented it with the Scott Goo Octocat. Now, what Kudu does is it allows the Azure Web App to communicate with your source control provider, right? And it communicates with all different source control providers like Bitbucket or GitHub, or for the 2 people who use Codeplex, or Dropbox. Okay, only one guy laughed at Dropbox. I'm not mad that you didn't laugh at the joke. I'm scared that you think Dropbox is a source control provider. You might not be in the right room right now if that's what you think. But I want to prove the point that we're still really just dealing with standard IIS under the covers. So I'm going to open up the Operation Manager's friend, and I'm going to come over here to Internet Information Services Manager. All right? Maybe you've seen this before. This is the GUI that you can use to configure IIS. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that I want to connect to a site, and I'm going to connect to the site that we just created a few moments ago. And so that server name is codeonthebeachdemo.scm. This SCM thing is special. We'll talk about that in a moment. .azurewebsites.net. Oh, look at that. I can autocomplete. :443. I'm going to specify the port because I'm going to do this on a secure channel. And then the site name, we named it Code on the Beach Demo. Awesome. Next, I need to authenticate. So my user is Nik Molnar, and my password is, whew, I almost said it, man. I almost said it, yeah. No, I said a curse word, and so it just got bleeped out. And there we go, we'll give it a name. Cool, finish. And now I am connected from my local machine up to some random box in Azure to that website. So I can open up the application settings node here, and I can see all the app settings that are in my web config, right? So some of the standard MVC ones like unobtrusive JavaScript enabled or client validation enabled, and we can see those. I'm going to go back here, and we'll really prove the point. Let me open up this HTTP redirect, and I'm going to turn on a setting to redirect all requests to something ubiquitous. One of my favorite websites of all time, sometimes red, sometimes blue.com. So if I come back to my website and I refresh, oh, no, it's okay, it's okay. It left on that back part. It redirected me to sometimes red, sometimes blue, which is an aptly named website because sometimes it's red and sometimes it's blue. So we don't want to look at this amazing website for the rest of the talk, so let me go ahead and turn off that redirect. We'll apply those changes again, and we'll come back to code on the... Some people are laughing at that joke much longer than I would expect. Don't usually have to hold it for color punchlines. So we'll go back to code on the beach demo, and boom, our website loads back up. So like I said, just standard IIS underneath the covers. The real magic is coming from this Kudu thing. So let's dive more into that layer. So Kudu, this is actually what a Kudu is. It's a goat on an acid trip. Somebody has the best laugh in the room right now. It's a service, but it's not the kind of service that we typically think of when we think of web services. When we think of web services, usually we think of a multi-tenant. Oh boy. We think of a you gotta tweet that picture to me, man. We think of a multi-tenant web service, right? We think of a service that's out in the cloud, and all of us connect to the same endpoint, and all of us are tenants, and we're all using it. Kudu is a single tenant web service, which means every time you create a web app in Azure, Kudu is provisioned right along with it. They go side by side. Almost think of it as a buddy site. And that has some interesting properties with it. It lives in the same sandbox as your website, which means that it has access to all of the secrets and the settings and things that your website has access to. And it means that technically it could royally screw up your website because it's kind of running in the same space. Because it's running in the same space, it also means everything that you're doing with Kudu is incurring billing against your website. So if you're spending all day long or sending a ton of traffic through Kudu, which you wouldn't do, but if you did, you would see that showed up billed on your website, right? It's just an extension of your website. And like I mentioned, it's open source, so theoretically, if you're got all of your data running in your own local data center, and you're like, oh man, I really like what Nik just showed me, I'd love to have Kudu running locally, you can download it and deploy it to your local environment. So, the way that I really like to explain Kudu, that was technically correct how it works, but the way I like to think about it is as a poor man's continuous integration server. Now, the reason why I think of it that way is because about 8, 9, 10 years ago, I used a CI server called cruisecontrol.net. Does anybody You do remember. I feel the pain. Yes, exactly. I remember spending hours in XML config to try to get XML, or to try to get cruise control to do what I wanted it to do. This is kind of a throwback to that in some ways. So just like cruise control, what Kudu really does, first and foremost, is it acquires your source code from your source control provider, which we already talked about all the different providers that it works with, and we saw an example of that. The next thing that it does is it builds your source code when applicable. So Azure Web Sites, I'm using a .NET site, but Azure Web Sites is not .NET specific. You can use .NET or PHP or Node or Java or Go. It supports basically everything. If you're in an environment like Java or .NET where a build is required, it will do a build. If you're using something like Node where you're just going to copy source over and run directly from source, it will just skip this build step and go directly over to the copy step, right? At the end of the day, whatever needs to get in the right place gets copied, whether those are DLLs or .js files. And so that's the third thing that it does. And then lastly, it does some notifications that the process has completed. And it does that in two different ways, either with post-deployment scripts, which is good for my buddy Neckbeard James over here, or it will use webhooks, which is good for a team developer. And so let's take a look at those two things. To do that, I'm going to come back over here to Portal, and we're going to start by FTPing into our website, which is a feature that you get automatically. So if I come to the dashboard, you'll see there's a link here for the FTPS hostname. I will right-click, copy that link address. A lot of people don't realize this, but Windows Explorer itself is an FTP client. So I'm just going to paste in that FTP address here. It's going to ask me to authenticate. So let me type in my username and password. And now I've FTP'd into the site. Great, you can see my log files are being written out here, right, because I'm writing to disk. I can open up the site and I see all kinds of information. www root, here's all of my files, right, my web config, my global ASAX, the things that you would expect to see in a web, especially an MVC website. There's this diagnostics folder where they write out lots of diagnostics information as things run, which is kind of cool if you ever need to Splunk into that. And then deployments, this is where the logs for all the deployments and whatnot go. So I'm going to come into this directory called Tools, and we're going to create a new directory in here called Post Deployment Actions. Now, we're going to put a batch file inside of here. So let me open up Notepad, and we'll just do something simple like echo hello code on the beach. Let me save this. Desktop is fine, so we'll call it sample.bat. OK, great, save. Awesome. And then let me open up my desktop. Here's the FTP folder on my left. And we're going to find sample.bat, and we'll just copy this over. Awesome. So now that folder is there, and that file is there. I'm going to come back to deployments, and I will do a redeploy. Now, I'm just redeploying, and there's no changes on Git because I didn't push any changes so far. So the redeployment should happen fairly quickly compared to last time, but we'll let that go ahead and run. I think somebody said they had a question. Nope, I'm hearing things. OK. No problem. We don't need to interact. We'll just sit here in awkward silence watching the spinner. All right, so the deployment finished. So if I drill into this now, I have a deployment log that I can look at. And if I zoom in, you will see that it executed sample.bat, and we echoed hello code on the beach. All right, now obviously this is kind of a dumb example, right? I'm just echoing something. That's not what you would want to do. But what you could do is after the deployment, upload some of your assets to a CDN with this script, or crunch down and minify your CSS and JavaScript, or shoot off an email, or do whatever it is that you would want to do from the command line. Now, I put one batch file in there. You can put as many batch files as you want to in that directory, and they run them in order, like if you sorted it by name, ASCII order basically. And if any one of them fails or returns an error code, it just stops the whole process, and they don't continue to run, and it'll roll back the deployment. So this is kind of a good way that maybe you could do a check to make sure everything showed up the way that you wanted it to. Now, the truth of the matter is the real reason why I just echoed something is because I'm not super comfortable writing batch files. I'm a web developer, right? I like JavaScript and HTTP and things like that. But the Azure website guys have something for me too, and that's this webhooks thing that I showed you down there at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up and create a webhook in a tool called Zapier. Zapier is kind of a competitor to ifthisthenthat.com, if you've seen that website. It's basically programming that even my mother could do. It's very simple. When this happens, do that thing. And it's really good for plugging different disparate systems together. So they call their little if statements zaps. So I'm going to make a new zap. Now, the reason why I like to use Zapier is because the Azure Web Sites team has worked with them to make the experience nicer here. But what I'm doing, you can do in custom code. You can do it any way you want to. But I'll go ahead and choose a trigger app, and we'll do a search for Azure. And there's lots of trigger apps, like if I got an IM or a tweet or my plant died like there's triggers for everything. And so what I want to do is when Azure Web Sites has a new site deployment, that's my when. Then what I want to do is there's lots of things I can do here. I can send emails or whatnot. I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to send an SMS message. And we'll send SMS, continue. I guess I should take my phone off the airplane mode, huh? And I need to connect it to my Azure website account. So I'm going to use this new one. Sorry there, I didn't mean to click that quickly. I'm going to connect to a different Azure Websites account than the one that it's already connected to. And it's asking me for this deployment trigger URL. So to find that, I can just come into the portal, go to my configuration tab, scroll down, and right here, deployment trigger URL. So I'm going to copy that, paste it into Zapier, and continue. All right, you can see my account is working. That's great news. Continue. I want to have it send me an SMS on my phone that's pre-configured. Great, continue. I can do filtering and stuff like that. We won't. Continue. Now I can specify a message. And so we'll say, from code on the beach. And that message can have tokens inside of it that come from Kudu. And so I can put in the git commit message, the status of whether the deployment was a success or failure, the author of who sent in that commit. So we'll just go ahead and put the commit message in there. Continue. Just run the test to make sure everything is working. Continue, and give this thing a name, code on the beach demo. We turn the Zap on. All right, now that the Zap is on, I will come back, go to deployments, redeploy my site. Yes. While that's happening, let me do this for you guys. Great. Let me try it 3 times in a row. Maybe that'll work. No. So I was going to show you what's happening on my phone, but you'll just have to look from here. A little hard for you to see. Oh, and it just popped up. I got a text message from Zapier. And it says, from code on the beach, tweak width of Twitter feed, which was the commit message of the last thing that I put in there. And so really simple, I went from GitHub to Azure to Zapier to my phone. And that's really powerful. There's a bird in here. Now, everything that I just did was kind of the standard out-of-the-box way of doing things, and I added a little configuration down here. But what about all these other steps? A lot of people ask me, well, what are the configuration points for all of where are the configuration points for those things? And the answer is they're everywhere. You could configure every single step of Kudu and how it works. So you can go into your app settings and you can specify any of these well-known keys that are available in the documentation, which I have a link for at the end of the presentation. And so you can change things like the target path, which is where the code will get deployed. If you don't want it going to www root because you're doing something different or fancy, you can go ahead and just set a variable, and that will change things. In addition, you can add an INI file. Yep, an INI file, back again to 1993. Well, I guess it's better than XML, but I don't. And so you can do things like change the build args that MS Build will end up using. You can turn on shallow cloning, which will make your copying of files quicker if you have like a lot of binaries inside of Git, things like that. And then the last option that you have, this is kind of the sledgehammer option, right? Just blow everything away, is you can say to Kudu, all right, these steps across the top, I like what you're doing. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to take all of that logic, I want you to write it down and give me that script so I can edit it and change everything that you do however I want to. So let's take a look at how to do that. I'm going to open up here to the command line. I am sitting in the directory for the repo that we're running, the full stack web perf. This is the mascots website. And I've installed the Azure CLI tools. And so if I just say Azure and I run, I get cool ASCII art and a bunch of options. So what I want to do is I want to get that deployment script though. So I'm going to say Azure site deployment script. I have to tell it that I'm running an ASP web application. And I have to point to my project file, which lives in demo/mascots of minorleaguebaseball.web/mascots of minorleaguebaseball.web.csproj. All right, that's the path to my CS project file. I also have a solution file, so I'll say -s and point to my solution, which lives at demo/demo.sln. Okay? So I'm pointing to 2 files and saying I want the deployment script for those 2 files. When I run that, Kudu will look at those 2 files. And wow, that was very fast. Kudu will look at those 2 files and generate a couple of files in my directory. So if I open up my directory now, I have a couple of new things in here. Let me show them to you. The first one is this .deployment file. And do you guys recognize what this is? This is an INI file. So this is that INI file that I was telling you about. And so we're overriding a variable called command. And so that's just a setting. And the command that we're looking at is called deploy.cmd, which is a file that we just had written for us. So if I open that up in Notepad, deploy.cmd. There you go. This is everything that Kudu does when my site gets deployed. It's very well commented, so you can come through and see a bunch of variables get set up that all have defaults if you haven't overwritten them. And then number 1, the big first step is restoring of the NuGet packages that my website needs. And then number 2 is building it. Let me turn off word wrap. That makes it a little bit easier to see, I think. So number 2 is building it. So you can see here the path to MS build, the path to my CS proj file, and all the way at the end, I mentioned that you can override the build args that get passed to MS build right there. If I had set that variable, they get passed right there. And so I can make MS build do whatever dancing I need it to do. If there is an error, it will stop. Otherwise, it does kudu sync, which is the place where the output gets copied to www-root so we can run it. And so with this file, I can customize it to do whatever it is that I want. So what's a good example of those kinds of things? Well, here, this is right between step 2 and 3. Right? I have this error that was there before, and now I have another one. I'm basically using the same MS build path to build my unit test project, right there at the top, right? I'm building test.csproj. And then I'm using xunit runners to run my tests. And if any single one of my tests fails, this will go to error, and my deployment will fail, and it will roll back to the last good version. And I will get a text message that says, code on the beach, deployment failure. And then I can go in and find it. So it's very, very powerful what you can do with the deployment scripts, because basically you can do anything. Now, Kudu offers a bunch of other functionality besides just getting bits from point A to point B. And that's where that SCM thing that I mentioned comes into play. So I'm going to copy my URL here. We'll get rid of Zapier because we don't need it anymore. And instead of just going straight to my website, I'm going to go to my website.scm.azurewebsites.net. Now, if any of you already have an Azure website, this might freak you out what I just did, because you have this too. So whatever your site.scm.azurewebsites.net is there. And this is very powerful. You see it says Kudu in the top left-hand corner. And so there's lots of different things we can do. First of all, this exposes a REST API. So if you want to interact with your website some way or write some custom code, this is a great way of doing it. So for example, I'll follow this files option. And oh, I don't have JSON View installed on this machine. I can follow through and I can see the entire directory structure just by following JSON payloads. Or I can come over here to environment, and I get all the information about where my website is running, the system info, the app settings, my connection strings, the environment variables, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really good if you're debugging a problem and you need to see what your machine kind of looks like. There's this debug console, which is really powerful. It has 2 options. You can either use the debug console in black, or you can use the debug console in blue, whichever one you prefer. I'll be here all 20 minutes.
Sometimes red.
So the blue one, for those of you who didn't get the joke, is PowerShell. I don't like PowerShell because I think it's kind of weird. My buddy Mike, who's an MVP for Azure, says to me, Nick, you know, you really need to learn PowerShell. And I told him I learned PowerShell. And I learn it again every time I need to use it for 5 minutes. So, but this is literally in my browser giving me a command window into the machine that my website is running in. And not only that, but it shows me the directory structure up here in HTML. So watch, if I go cd site, enter, not only do I change where I'm at in the command, but I change where I am here. And if I click on one of these links, my command updates. Right, so that's really cool. I have direct access. I can do whatever. Yeah, that would be pretty awesome. So that's pretty slick. There's other tools like a process explorer, so I can see the processes that are running on that machine. That's the same as me saying Control-Shift-Escape. Right, here's my task manager of my local machine. Here's an HTML version of the task manager on the remote machine. I can kill processes and release file handles through this UI. And there's a whole bunch of other tools, like I can download a diagnostics dump right there, and then I can open it up. Yeah, that's fine. So Kudu is quite powerful, and it offers a lot through that .scm website. Now, there was a lot of oohs and ahs when I told you that your site has .scm. I will tell you that it is authenticated. The only reason I went straight there is because I've already logged in when I logged into the portal. Now, the challenge with authentication around Azure is you actually have 3 different accounts for every different website. And you use those accounts in different contexts. And so I like to take a moment to stop and let you realize that Kudu will support all of them, but not all tools support all of them. Actually, the first time I ever gave this talk, Kudu only supported the top 2, but not the last one. That was a change that happened recently. So the first thing that I can use is my user credentials. If you look in the portal at the dashboard, you'll see that because there's something that says reset deployment credentials. Deployment credential is user credential. That is a credential that sticks to you and runs across all of your sites. So if I give you my user credentials, you can compromise not just my Code on the Beach demo, but also Herd Dog and my other websites. Do not give out that username and password. The next one is a site credential. That is a credential that is automatically created and is stuck to your site. You will recognize that credential because the username will always be $ your site name, and the password will always be some crazy gobbledygook that's been assigned for you. You didn't realize it, but we've already used a site credential. And anytime you're using tools like Visual Studio or something like that, and it says, hey, give me your published profile has the site credential embedded into it. You know what else has the site credential embedded in it? Remember that deployment trigger URL we used? When we plugged into Zapier? There's my username, $ Code on the Beach demo, and after that colon is my crazy password. All right, you guys write it down? You can compromise me? So you can use either of those with Kudu. And then lastly, you can use your Microsoft account, right? And so that's probably your email address, or maybe you had a Hotmail account or a Live account. That kind of all goes together. And so mine's my Gmail account, and I can log in with that. And so everything in Kudu is authenticated. All right, so lots of debugging and diagnostics and deployment stuff. Let's also take a look at configuration and what Kudu and Azure Web Apps allows us to do with that. Now, parts of this diagram may look familiar to those of you in the room who are .NET developers. The 3 circles in blue here, that's a gorilla. The 3 circles in blue here have been with us as .NET developers the whole time. There was machine config, which is the top level configuration file, and then a lower level file, which is the root web config, gets merged in, and then you have your own web config file here, and you can have lots of them nested in folders, and those all get merged up. All of those blue circles get merged together to make one config file. And in IIS 6 and below, that was the entire configuration story. In IIS 7, Microsoft added a new configuration file called application host. And if you've ever done anything with IIS, you might have to, IIS Express, the web server that ships with Visual Studio, you may have had to go and edit this application host config file. And so that gets merged in at the root web configuration. And that comes down to the final. When you're running Azure Web Sites, you get an additional set of configuration, which is the Azure overrides. And so remember when I went into the configuration tab and I showed you where the key value pairs are available, right when we started this conversation? Those are the Azure overrides. And so that gets merged in at the last moment. So lots of different ways that we can configure things. Now, web and app hosts both have these little XDT bubbles on them. XDT is the XML transform schema. If you've been in Visual Studio and you have your web.config, and then you can open that up and branch down, and then you have web.debug.config and web.release.config. Those are XDT files. Those describe how to transform an XML document from A to B. Kudu supports XDTs in both of those places, so you can change the way that those files look in production. Let me go ahead and show you how this works. I'm going to come over back to SCM. I'll go back into the black command window. Go into site www.root. And I have an SVG file called outercurve.svg. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to drag it over here to this table. I'm going to drop it, and that automatically uploads my SVG file. All right, so that's sitting at the root of my website. So if I come back to my website and I say /outercurve.svg and run it, I get an error. Okay. Now, the file is there, but by default, IIS isn't configured to know how to serve SVG files. It doesn't know what they are. So we need to get IIS to understand that this is an asset that can be served. So I have a file here called application-host.xdt. This is one of those transform files. I'm going to go back into my FTP client here, right? We FTP'd up this sample.bat. I'm going to come here to the site directory, right? I'm right here in site, and I'm going to copy over application host. All right, so that file is there in that special location. I'll come back to the portal. Let's go ahead and stop and restart our web server. Now, when this is restarting, Kudu will see that I've put that XDT file there. It will look at the application host config that it's going to use. It will transform it to create a new one and merge that new one in. I'll show you the content of that transform that I just did in a second. Now that that's done, I can come back, refresh my site, and I'm serving my SVG file that I can zoom into forever. All right? And outercurve is the open source foundation that Kudu belongs to. So what was in that magic file? Well, this is the entirety of it, and I'm being fancy and putting more in there than I need to. So basically, I'm saying that inside of the system.webserver element, inside of static content, I want to add in a MIME map. I want to map a file extension to a MIME type, and I'm saying that .svg files should be served as image/svg plus XML. And that whole element and its parents, I want to be inserted into application host.config. That's it. I just added an element to that XML file without having to open it and change it because I don't have access to it. Now, I'm big into performance. If you saw my talk yesterday, you'll know that. So I'm doing some other stuff here to compress the SVG. I don't really need to do that for the purposes of this talk, just to get the file to be served. But this concept of leveraging transforms opens up some really interesting opportunities for us. Because this one, you might be saying, well, Nick, I could have just added that line into my web.config file. And based on the way that all the configuration merges, this would have worked, and I don't have to do this crazy Kudu specific thing. Well, you're right. So let's take a look at this one. What this one is doing is it's adding in a variable called queue length. So the way IIS works is you make a request to the website, and there's a thread pool that's responding to requests. If all those threads are busy and a new request comes in, it gets put into a queue. If that queue fills up because you have so many requests coming in, by default, I believe it's 1,000. The first 1,000 people will wait. The 1,001st person, IIS will say, I'm not putting you in the queue, and it will respond with a 503 service unavailable. All right? So what I'm doing is, I don't want that to happen. I'm not necessarily recommending that you do this. This is maybe a setting that's not good for you. Is I'm changing that queue length to 5,000. All right? And so I'm finding the existing attribute, and I'm changing its value. But there's something a little different about this file, and that is right here. I'm using a variable. It's surrounded with percentages. So if you used variables right now and XGTs inside of Visual Studio, it wouldn't work. This is something special with Kudu. Kudu will scan my XGT file before it uses it to find those variables, and it will replace it with environment variables that are available. So because that setting is site-specific, and I have to type in the site name, I would have to hard code in Code on the Beach demo there. That's a pain in the butt. I can just do this and use dynamically the site name, and I can run this across all of my sites with one config change. All right, still maybe not that interesting. But once we have variables, it allows us to do this transform. You'll notice that I'm using lots of different variables: app pool name, extension path, site name. This is essentially adding a virtual directory to my site. All right, why is a virtual directory that interesting? Well, this introduces the concept of a site extension. Site extensions live on this 10 lines of XML. So let me take a step back. When we walked into the room today, we knew there was a thing called Azure Web Apps. All right? We deployed a user site, which maybe you realized was there, but didn't know that that's not all that's there that's running in your web app. I told you there's a buddy site, which is called Kudu. I lied to you a little bit. Kudu is a site extension that runs. And you get a bunch of different ones. If you've ever used web jobs or heard of those, or you use Visual Studio Online, Codename Monaco, or Web Deploy, those are all site extensions that Microsoft provisions for you out of the box. But you can also, a user can upload or install their own site extension. So if I come back to that Kudu portal, and I click on the Site Extensions tab, you'll see that I don't have any of them installed, but I can click on Gallery and I have a whole bunch of options: Visual Studio Online, Application Insights, a web log browser, etc., PHPMyAdmin. All of these are coming from a special NuGet gallery. It's not NuGet.org where you normally get NuGet files from. It's at siteextensions.net. And so you can see here's a NuGet gallery. New Relic is in there. So let me go ahead and install one of them. I'm just going to install a very simple one, File Counter. I hit plus. Install. Because what that's done is it's made some configuration changes. I actually have to restart my site, which it tells me. So let me go ahead and restart the site. And now that we're done restarting, I can press play, and it will open up my URL /file counter. That's the virtual directory. It was called File Counter. And I get this amazing site extension that tells me that I have 541. Now, this is just a virtual directory. So this could be an entirely separate web app. This could be a web forms app that's living in its own virtual directory. It could be another app entirely, whatever you want it to be. This is just a sample to show you how things are running. Now, let me tell you a story. Our website here, I showed you a couple of my favorite mascots. The mascots every year have a contest called Mascot Mania. It's the Olympic Games of mascottery. They have contests like pie throwing and t-shirt gun sharpshooting. And everybody laughed at me yesterday, but I told them it wasn't a joke because it's the truth, and it is the truth. And so Lucille from the Columbus Clippers won this year. And every year, the people who run this website, they call me and say, hey, Nick, I need to change out the hero image, the big image on the home screen, because we have a new mascot who won it all. And I say, OK. Well, I mean, you guys know how like war is the mother of all innovation, right? I think laziness is the mother of all technical decision making, right? I'm big in the LDD camp, right? Laziness-driven development. And so I say, awesome. I should build like a little admin tool so you guys can come to the website, you can click on the admin link, and you can log in, and then you can just go and change who the winner is. But I'm lazy. And dealing with authentication and maybe HTTPS and user management and resetting passwords, like that's a lot of work to build all that stuff. So how about I just go hack the HTML once a year? That's what I do. That's what I do. Come on, you would do it too. But site extensions are really interesting because they run inside of SCM. And SCM has all kinds of authentication mechanisms built in that we already covered. And user management and provisioning is handled. And my client, my customer who runs this website, already has access to go and change things on Azure. They already have their own accounts. I don't have to manage it. Microsoft does that for me. So what if I make that the admin portal? And so to do that, I'm going to come back up in our FTP. I'm going to refresh here because we should have another folder. Yep, we have a folder called Site Extensions. Here's the folder for the virtual directory of File Counter. I'm going to upload one called Hero. And inside of Hero, I have two files. I have default ASPX, and I have my transform file, which is the transform file that I already showed you on the slides here. So I'm going to copy this Hero folder over. Now let's take a look at that default ASPX. Very, very simple file. Simple on purpose. This could be a much nicer looking web page, and it should be because it's customer facing, but I kept it simple for the purposes of this conversation. Basically what it does is it does a giant if statement to see if this is a GET request or a POST request. Okay? Notice I don't have to ask where the database lives. Because I'm running in Kudu, I have access to all of the settings of their website. So boom, there I'm getting the connection string and I can connect to the database. If it's a GET, I do some SQL here to get all of the mascots from the database. And I basically write out a giant select filled with a bunch of different options, right? So I'm making a dropdown in HTML. And so there's a little form there that gets dynamically rendered, and they can pick who the new mascot that one was. And if it's a post, when they hit submit, I just update the mascots database. All right? So I uploaded that, that folder. Once again, we have to stop and restart the server because I'm making a configuration file change. Start. And so if I come to, instead of /file counter, I called it /hero. This will take a second. Boom. Now we have a drop-down of all the different mascots, so I can say who the winner of Mascot Mania 2015 is, and who is my favorite mascot. Test time. Balapino. You guys are good. So let's go ahead and make Balapino the winner. Submit. It's been updated. Come back to the home page. Refresh. I did just restart the web server. Balapino. And so I now have an admin portal. I did very little work. I didn't even make the page pretty. So site extensions are super powerful. All right, awesome. We have a couple of minutes left. I thought that might happen, so I prepared a little bit of bonus content for you. Are you guys liking this kind of stuff? Yeah, good, good, good. This talk is Azure Web Sites secrets, because these are all things that are supported and that you're allowed to do, but I consider it a secret because it's either not in the portal, there's no UI to support these things, or it's really hard to find the UI. And so I'm going to kind of continue on with that trend. So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about load balancing. So far, we've only discussed Azure Web Sites as if there was one server that was running our website, right? But the beauty of the cloud is it's elastic and you can scale out, right? So my website can be running on lots of different machines. And so what this really looks like is there's not one machine, but our client in their browser, they make a request through the internet and they hit this ARR thing that I mentioned earlier, application request routing. It's a reverse proxy that is built on top of IIS. Essentially, it's a load balancer. Right? And so a request comes in, and it will either send you to web frontend 1, 2, or whatever, however many you have, it will pick, and it will balance the load. The algorithm that it uses to balance the load, if you get really deep down, I think it can be configured. But by default, application request routing uses a sticky routing algorithm, which means if I make the first request and I go through and it says, well, what box are we going to put Nik on? Let's put Nik on 1. It has the least amount of load. Nik goes to 1. And then James comes in and he makes a request. It says, what box are we going to put James on? It's like, well, 1 is still the lowest utilized box, so we're going to put James on 1. Now, I start doing really stupid, big, heavy things, and I eat up all of the resources inside of server 1. So now server 1 is doing way more work than server 2 because of me and the traffic that I'm driving. Well, James makes another request. But because sticky routing is on, even though box 2 isn't doing anything, and I'm using up all the resources on box 1, he already was assigned to 1 previously, and so he's stuck there. And he goes back to 1. So that's sticky routing. If you open up your configuration, though, you can do this in your web config or any of the ways that I've shown you that you can do configuration, and you add a custom HTTP header called ARR disable session affinity, and you set that to true. On the response back out, when the response comes out from the web front end back to ARR, it will see, oh, you know what? James isn't supposed to be sticky. And on the next request that James makes, it will put him on whatever box has the least amount of load. So we can much more evenly balance the load, but I will warn you, your app needs to be built for that kind of thing. If you're doing anything in memory, like in-memory caching or in-memory session storage, which is fine, I wouldn't recommend that for the cloud. You're going to get screwed, right? Because James's session might be living on front end 1, and the next time he goes to front end 2, and boom, he has a session and null reference exceptions everywhere. So make sure that you're using out-of-proc storage if you're doing those kinds of things, and you can more evenly distribute your load. The other thing that I want to show you, let me come over here to the command line again. I'm going to say Azure Site Show, and we called it Code on the Beach Demo. I'm going to run that. This is going to go off and it's going to get some information for me about my website and just dump it out to the screen. And so while that's running, I want to come back to my website. I'm going to open up the developer tools that I have on my browser. I'll refresh the page. Now I come here to resources, cookies. You will see that I have a cookie called ARR, Application Request Routing, Affinity. And there's some GUID there. That's how the application request router knows what machine I'm stuck on. And that ID, that value there, is the name of my machine. So if I come back to this, and so let me see, on my machine, it ends in EEA86. If I come back and I look at all of my information that got dumped out, you see I have my instance IDs. I have my site configured to run on 2 web front ends right now. You can see the first web front end here, EEA86. That's the machine that I'm pegged to. If I, for some reason, want to go to the other machine, I can just copy this other ID, go and edit my cookie in whatever cookie editor I like, re-request, and now I'm forcing myself to go to the other box. So if you're currently in a situation where you are using in-session memory, I'm sorry, I said that backwards, in-memory session, and you want to do some testing and you want to force yourself to switch to different boxes, you can just go and edit these cookies. And so I think it's really kind of fun when you start to screw around with the load balancer and whatnot. It is, it is. So we have 3 minutes left for questions. I know some of you might want to go to lunch early, so I will say thank you very much for coming. You guys are great. I was awesome. You can find more resources. You can find more resources at my blog, nikcodes.com/Azure Website Secrets Exposed, or take a picture of that QR code, and I will hang out and answer questions for as long as you want. I have a few more glimpse stickers if anybody wants them as well. Thank you guys very much.